So, hello and welcome to the Berlin Dance Music Event 2023. We are here now at the Ritter Butzke with Wez Saunders from Defected. So, hello Wesley, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your position and how you got to Defected?
Sure, nice to meet you all. Thanks for coming today. My name is Wez Saunders and I am the CEO of Defected Records. I've worked for Defected for the best part of a decade, actually, previously as managing director, and as of last summer, I acquired the business for a management buyout and I'm now CEO and co-owner of the business. I'll talk to you about how that journey began. So a long time ago, a galaxy far, far away, my parents are big music fans, and they introduced me actually to dance music inadvertently when my dad brought home a record called Pump Up the Volume by Mars back in the mid-80s. And at that time, a lot of people, my friends, were just, as young kids, were all listening to Michael Jackson and Madonna, and this single record had kind of captured my attention because my dad sat me down and explained to me about sampling, and this is Eric B. and Rakim, and this is James Brown, and he was going through the samples, and that just blew my mind as a kid. And not long after that, they actually bought me a Sony Walkman. For those of you that are young enough not to know what one of those are, it's a tape that you put inside and a radio. And I dropped it down the stairs, like literally opened it Christmas morning, dropped it down the stairs, tape deck didn't work, and all I could listen to back then was Kiss FM, which was an illegal radio station in the UK at the time, pirate radio station. And there were DJs like Roger Sanchez and Trevor Nelson and Colin Dale and Colin Favor, and these people playing on the radio, instrumental records, acid house records. And as a kid, 10 years old, I didn't really know what they were, but I just knew that I liked those things. And then as my teenage years came upon us, I started getting into jungle and drum and bass, because that was very much front and centre of British culture at the time, certainly in a rave scene, and was a bit of a junglist. Don't look at it like that anymore, but I loved it, and but I couldn't mix jungle at all. Like, my cousin had decks, I was trying to mix jungle records all over the place, like a train wreck. And in 1994, my parents bought me our first set of decks. Over the previous few years, I had cousins that were DJing for like acid house DJs, and they, at the end of, as I think many of you know, when a record becomes a little bit too commercial, cool DJs come away from those records, so they would give them to me. And thankfully for me, that meant my record collection included records like Joe Smooth Promised Land and Frankie Knuckles' Tears and Robin S. Show Me Love, and all these records that were 4/4 that I actually could mix with. And I started getting into house music, started mixing, started blagging, lying about my ability to DJ and my age. And in the late 90s, I actually won a competition called Bedroom Bedlam, a music magazine, which was a DJ contest, and started DJing around Europe for Global Underground and Renaissance. And everything was like going quite well at that time. And then my wife fell pregnant with our daughter, and me and my wife have been married since 2001. We were actually married with 2 children by the time we were 22. And I decided to focus on what my mother-in-law called a real job. And I worked for Deutsche Bank, and I worked there.
What a coincidence.
I know. I worked there for 12 years. And during my time at Deutsche Bank, I was still really heavily into music, cataloguing my own music, ripping all of my vinyl to MP3 at the time, and just still collecting music and cataloguing and just being a bit of a nerd, really. And but at the same time, I was focused on a career at Deutsche Bank, and I was promoted every 2 years I was there. And I was vice president on the way to director. I would have been the youngest director in Deutsche Bank's operations history, aged 29. And my brother died of leukemia. And he was only 24. I was 27 at the time. And I was like, you know what? Life's too short. I can't sit here doing this for the rest of my life. And I went home, spoke to my wife, said, look, I don't want to do this anymore. And I was very thankful that she backed my decision. And I spoke to my mum, because I'm still a massive mummy's boy. And I asked my mum and what she thought, and she backed my decision. And it took me about 18 months to work myself into a position of redundancy, actually. And I was very fortunate that my manager and my commitment to Deutsche Bank through that time had enabled me to be in a position to do that. Lucky, you may say, but you make your own luck. I worked hard to get into that position. And unfortunately, I remind myself every day that I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the tragic passing of my brother, who I miss every day. But he was my best friend, and he would have definitely wanted me to do what I love best in life. So the day before my 30th birthday, I left the bank. The day after, I started up my own small record label business, and I phoned up all of the guys that I was DJing with in the late 90s, and all of them in their superstar DJ status. Naturally, didn't have any time to help in any way, shape or form, which is fine. And I thought, you know what, if I'm going to go out on this, I'm going to have to do it my own way. So I started my own small label, started to tap into development artists that I was kind of very fond of, people that I was buying records from, artists that I had grown up listening to. I was fortunate enough to manage to get records from Terry Farley and Rocky and Colin Dowell, who was one of the original people that I was kind of got me into the music from the Kiss FM days. And the way independent dance music works with small independent labels is you work for 3 months, and in 60 days at the end of the quarter, you get your paycheck. So July, August, September, October, November, end of November, got my first paycheck, opened it up, 265 quid. I was like, how the hell am I going to be able to support my family on this sort of income? Now, my philosophy in life is very simple. I'm not competitive. I'm quite friendly, actually, I think. And I just thought, you know what? I just need to do better than the person I was yesterday. That's just it. How do I do better than this? So what started off as one label became a suite of 5 labels. They were genre specific because that's the way the industry is turning. It was around the time of EDM, and I was completely removed from that, and I focused on releasing true house music, deep house, techno, and I had a development arm teaching young people how to produce. Set up a charity organisation in Stratford in East London, and we were teaching young people how to produce music with functional skills, kids that were not in education, employment and training. And we were teaching people how to do TV presenting and radio presenting and production. We had some people come through the course that went on to be like Brit Award, like Jay Huss and J5, who was one of the assistant producers, and Notes, and a number of other students that went on to be successful in the UK. Dobby, who's on Apple, I think now, as a radio presenter, and there was quite a few people that were there. As well as that, I was running the labels, I was DJing, I was producing, I was writing for other people. I had a chance encounter of meeting Darren Emerson of formerly Underworld. We're both West Ham fans, got on very well, drove him home from Ministry of Sound, ended up managing him and his labels. And it was just a lot of kind of things like that were going on. But got to the end of 2013, and I'd worked with a lot of my heroes. I kind of felt like I was hitting a ceiling in what I was doing. I was finishing work at 3 a.m, getting up at 7:30 to take the kids to school, starting a day and going round in these circles of not sleeping very much and working relentlessly for a kind of where I felt like I was at a ceiling. And part of my career path in investment banking, we always worked in mentorships, and I worked as a mentor and being mentored, and that was kind of reflective of the charity work that we did too. So I just thought, you know what, I've got nothing to lose here. And I sent Simon Dunmore, the founder of Defected Records, an email to say, this is who I am, this is what I've done. I'd just like to have a chat with you, get some advice on what I can do. So I went in for a meeting with Simon. He very kindly invited me in. And I think every time I tell this story, the time gets longer and longer. I was in there for about 3 hours, maybe. But we had a really good chat. And it was around the time of Wolf of Wall Street. I don't know if you've seen that film, but when I was leaving Simon's office, he said to me, I believe you can sell me this pen. And I wasn't really sure exactly what that meant at the time. And 2 days later, he phoned me up and he said, look, do you want a job as club promotions manager at Defected Records? So I said, what does that entail? Because I thought, I'm not a club promoter. And he said, no. You need to get Defected Records played by club DJs. I thought, he's going to pay me to do that. Yes, I'll do that. Yeah. So I said to Simon, look, I'll do that, sure. So he said, come in. He said, but you've got to stop all of the other things that you're doing. And I was doing a lot. So I went, okay. So I made a decision to sacrifice my own business to enter into a world where I felt that I could match my ambitions. And it was a sacrifice. Another second sacrifice I made after my brother died, leaving a very well-paid job in investment banking to earn 265 quid in 3 months. I did it again to take a step back and start at the bottom, really, at Defected. And it was the junior position at the time, the most junior position in the company. But very quickly, within a 2-year period, I went from club promotions manager to radio plugger, because ultimately the thing I love most about the music industry is the music, and making records fulfill their potential is my #1 desire every day. And I became executive producer of the Defected in-house radio show, switching copyright out as presenters and making Sam Devine the presenter for the first time. I became label manager. I became head of marketing for recordings and the music side of the business, including music and publishing, and then head of marketing for the business. And in 2016, when the previous managing director decided that he and Simon would part ways, Simon asked me, "What's your ambitions?" And I said, "Well, one day I'd like to run the company." And he said, "Well, what about now?" So it was like everything I'd done in my entire life, all my pre-Deutsche Bank days, my Deutsche Bank days, my own music business, everything I'd done had led me to this point where I was given the opportunity to run Defected Business. So I said, okay, and I took the responsibility of doing so as managing director. It was quite an interesting time because at that moment, there was still a bit of a cultural shift from digital downloads to streaming, and some labels, particularly in the dance scene, were maybe a little late to Spotify at that time, and there was a little bit of a concern as to whether or not streaming was going to kill the DJ download business. So there was a lot of uncertainty, and what I felt was pretty sure, I was pretty sure of, being a music collector and somebody that catalogues music and puts it, you know, spends too long cataloguing music. Still, I'm going to go and sort my record collection out on Sunday again. Was that I just knew that there was something in that streaming kind of world. So I spoke to Simon and said, look, we were a compilations business at the time. And I said, we need to focus our attention on being a singles business, because the way that people are going to start to consume music and creating their own playlists, which had just been announced at Spotify, the playlist functionality, was that people were going to make their own playlists. They're going to start listening to their own music, and that would include commuting, gym, other. And so he trusted my judgment, especially as somebody that likes to promote music. And we literally almost overnight switched off our compilations business and focused our attention on singles. During that time, I'd set up a label internally at Defected called DFX, which none of you would have heard of because it lasted about 5 minutes. But we had, the part of DFX was designed to go and find commercially viable records that DJs might play that could work in streaming playlists and on radio. I reached out to a few people. The first record was from a guy called Bram Fido, I think may even be from Berlin. We had a couple of records that did okay. SKT released something. But I got this record. I've been talking to Camel Fat about records for the label, and they sent me Monster, and I said, no, it wasn't right. They sent me a bootleg of Jungle Brothers, and that we couldn't get clearance. And then they sent me a record, and the email title was Solomon playing Camel Fat, and I didn't listen to it for about 5 weeks. I was at home one Sunday, going through, I thought, I forgot about that record. And I tried to find the email, press play, link was dead. Contacted Dave Whelan, sent it to me again. It was Cola. And I said, okay, this is probably a little bit bigger than what our plans were for DFX. So I handed that record over to Simon and Andy Daniel, and we signed it for Defected. And around that time, we'd spoken about how we can leverage from the global growth on streaming services and really start to come up with international marketing strategies and what that looked like for Defected. We didn't really know at that time. And of course, Cola just became a monster in its own right. And I'll never forget, in Ibiza in 2017, I walked from Cafe Mambo to Eden, and you walk, for those that know Ibiza, you kind of walk past the West End, and there was DJs playing it in Mambo, there was DJs playing it on the High Street, there was DJs playing it at West End, DJs playing it at Eden, and I was like, okay, we've got something here. And we, very quickly, that record, became the beast that it is. And I realised that we could really leverage from that and the other activity we were doing to tap into international markets. And we did that to grow our profile exponentially. Our Croatia Festival had just launched as well in 2016. And we noticed that was drawing people from around the world. And we just decided to kind of carry on along that way. So that changed the whole dynamics from being a label that really focuses attention on quite UK-centric, Ibiza-centric, some international marketing, to being able to look out beyond that. And Cola went on to be nominated for a Grammy, and that really, be certified in about 40 times around the world. The following year, we kind of just looked back and said, how do we do better than this? How do we kind of gain momentum from here? And we decided to put on our London festival. And then the following year, we were going to do our Ibiza festival. And every year, it was just, what else, what else, what else? And then 2020, we were about to go into our best year the company had ever had. And COVID happened. And in March of that year, 3 days before I was supposed to go to a holiday that I'd planned for 10 years with my family, going to all around North America, we shut the office, and I went home and I just sat in my armchair, a bit like this actually, in the corner of a room. And I was just like, how are we gonna deal with this situation? And the one thing that Defected do, always have done, is put our community front and center of what we do. And that's not just the fans, but the DJs and the producers too. Like, everything we do we are you. We are fans of house music. And I was just like, right, what are we going to do? And I just called Simon. I said, we need to do a virtual festival. We need to do something that enables people to focus. We're only going to be locked down for 3 to 6 weeks. It'll be fine. We'll just do this for a couple of weeks, and then we'll go back to the office. So we started that. We did the very first one, actually. We actually did the very first virtual festival full stop, and that was before the British government had locked us down. We did it at Ministry of Sound. DJs wiping the decks with sanitizer in between mixes because everyone was paranoid about COVID. It's just, when you look back now, it's quite mad, really, the things that you did. And we focused our attention on giving people a little bit of hope, and it was as simple as that. The second week, we did a pre-recorded replay of sets that we had already recorded previously from our festivals, and the feedback wasn't that great. People were like, oh, this is, it's not great. So we took a week out and we decided we were going to do it live. And then from the fourth week, which was the second week after everybody was locked down in Europe, we broadcast for 26 weeks consecutively for virtual festival activity, raising $1.2 million for COVID-19 Solidarity Response Fund, £100,000 for Mind, and really just putting ourselves in a position where we were raising money and awareness and just giving people a bit of hope, just to let them know it's Friday afternoon. I mean, the amount of messages I'd get saying, thank God for the festivals. I didn't know what day of the week it was. Now I know it's Friday. So it was quite important for us to keep doing that. It had wiped out half of our income. Our events business at that time was 50% of our income for the business. So we didn't know how long it was going to go on, and actually making calls to cancel some events that are very lucrative and important for us was a challenge, but the right thing to do. And anyway, we carried on. What that virtual festival activity did was it put 50 million viewers on our activity during that time. It really put Defected in the shop window. We were contacted by Heineken to do the relaunch of the Europa and Champions League, which we did. Idris Elba at the top of the Adam Tower, Monkey from the stadium in Portugal where the Europa League final was played. That was one of a couple of brand deals that came to the table that wanted to tap into this reach. Opal asked us to soundscape the new Mocha, which I was actually involved with the production on the recordings and the soundscaping for that project, an advert campaign. And then we started to get a little bit of interest from parties who actually wanted to buy the business. So we had a major label contact us and ask if they could acquire the business, and Simon and I went and had the meetings and didn't feel like that was the right decision because they didn't understand our events business. And we had an events company in Ibiza that was funded by a venture capitalist that didn't really understand our recordings business, and that didn't feel right. And with my investment banking days, I know a couple of people that are able to raise funding and financing for various things. And a friend of mine had said to me repeatedly that if I wanted to raise the money to buy the company, that he could help. So I presented that as an option to Simon. We went and sat with his lawyers and said, right, what's Simon's options? And It's like we've got major label, venture capitalist, we can do an EMI or an EOT, or we can do a management buyout. And he said, well, management buyout would be my preference because that will protect the history and the heritage and the culture. And he and I had worked together for the best part of a decade, and it will protect the staff too. That was the end of 2021. And yeah, by July 29th, 2022, I managed to complete the acquisition of Defected Records with my partners. The plan now for Defected is very much business as usual. I am not looking to change anything. I have worked with Simon. I'm a fan. I respect the history and heritage of house music. The only way for me to take Defected forward and be successful is to continue the work that Simon and I have done together for the best part of 10 years. As of February this year, Simon isn't working with the company anymore. We're all very friendly and amicable, but he, as he said to me, he can't be a half-stepper. He can't be in, half out. And for him, he's a control freak, as am I. And, you know, that's not good for our relationship for us to be working under those guidelines. But we are friends. I had dinner with him Friday. He's happy with how it's going, and that's all that's most important to me. And now it's time for Defected 2.0 to continue the work of Defected for the last 25 years.
Okay, thank you for that long introduction. First of all, from my side, my condolences and respect for the turnaround and the mental turnaround to like keep going and taking the death of your brother, like to get to those heights. Can you, like, for the German fans over here, like tell us a little bit more about Defected itself, like what the brand is about? I mean, I could imagine that there's still some people in Germany that don't know so much about what the Defected family and the whole cultural thing is about.
Yeah. So Defected will be 25 years old next year, and it's an interesting thing because that kind of could make it sound quite old, and it really isn't. We're constantly looking to reinvent ourselves. I mean, the two main mantras of the business are, in our house, we're all equal, because we do believe in equality and diversity, and we have put a lot of effort into inclusion through the business, actively promoting that. And also house music all life long, because like you, we're fans, and you know, it's all about house music. We control 26 labels, own or control 26 labels, including Defected Records, DFTD, which is a little more club-focused, Glitterbox, which you may or may not know, is a events brand and a label that focuses on contemporary house and disco. We have D for Dance, which is a more commercial end, classic music company, which was originally started by Luke Solomon, and Derek Carter. We also have some heritage labels, including New Groove, Move In, Sleeping Bag Records, Sulfuric, and so on. So we have quite a large roster. We also have a number of artist repertoire that we own and control, including Mike Dunn, Mr. V, Todd Edwards, and many more. As well as being a record label, which is front and center of everything we do, we are also a publishing company. We actually publish 20% of Elton John Dua Lipa Cold Heart record, thanks to Panau sampling the bass line of Chicken Lips, He Not In. We actually have 50% of 2 records on Beyonce's album, Alien Superstar and Cozy, written and produced by Honey Dijon, Luke Solomon, Chris Penny, and Dave Giles II. We publish Purple Disco Machine, we publish John Summit, and we are kind of expanding out into the publishing world. As an events business, we now do 400 events a year across mainly 3 touring brands and Defected, Glitterbox, which are the main 2, but also D for Dance this year too, which is kind of growing. We also do events under the Classic Music Company brand, and we were also part of the early inception of Sondela, which is an Afro tech label which Louis Dunmore actually now owns and is now taken outside of the business since the departure of Simon. Again, very amicable. Don't want to start any rumours that things have gone sour. That's not the case. We're all friends. We also have an agency where we look after a number of artists, including Sam Divine, Ferric Dawn, Moose T, Shapeshifters, Fat Tony, and many more. And yeah, as a business, we are very active as a digital agency, providing all of our own content, all of our own PR and promotions, all of our own digital marketing and social media strategies. And there's a lot more. Oh, and we also have our own retail outlet for our store. So as a business, we've grown quite exponentially. There was 30 of us going into COVID, 50 by July last year, and there's currently nearly 90 people that work for the company.
Respect to that. And can you tell us a little bit, like, when you started, did you have a musical background? You said it was more like self-taught you did. Would you say like your banking experience like really helped you to get into the company and to like build the brand up like in like a more, I don't want to call it commercial way, but like a more structured way?
I'd say strategic, I would say. I would say that my experience in banking gave me three real skill sets that I would say contributed to my ability to bring it into the music industry. One was organisation skills, one was strategy, and the other was what Deutsche Bank really promoted was corporate and social responsibility. And actually that is something that I was really able to kind of connect with our fan base and the brand, and able to promote all of those things. You know, do quite a lot of charity work behind the scenes that I don't really like to talk too much about, but I think that we prefer to act. Actions speak louder than words. So as a business, for us, it's really important to kind of do the right thing and do it rather than talk about it. But what did it enable me to do? When in 2017, we had an offsite in Ibiza, and we sat out there and we said, right, what does a future next 3 years of Defected look like? And how do we do all of the things I just said? How are we organised? How do we adhere to our community? How are we there for them? How do we grow as a business? And we came up with a strategy which we called 10-10-20, and the 10-10-20 stood for growing our community to 10 million followers by October 2020. And it wasn't about the number. It wasn't never about the 10 million followers. It was about the culture and the mindset. It's like, are these events good enough for 10 million people? Are these records good enough for 10 million people? And just really thinking about that. In all honesty, when I set the strategy up, I would have been happy at 5 million. But I didn't tell staff that. I like to set the bar high. We didn't quite hit the 10 million in October 2020. It was about 9, but we're about 11 million followers across the board now, across all of our social channels. And it was really about developing that culture and mindset internally, and for people to think about, you know, looking after that many people. What does that look and feel like, and how do you behave in that way? And I do think that we pride ourselves on, you know, I like to think that we pride ourselves on it. I see Matt standing at the back there. He's going to heckle me later, but I hope that I will agree that you know, as an organisation, the staff behave in the way that, you know, the fans behave. And we have a quite unique community, actually. I mean, if you come to our Croatia festival, it's pretty special. You know, we tend to avoid the kind of tech house frat boy mentality.
Absolutely.
And I think the way we talk about that on our social media attracts the right person to our events and within the ecosystem. So no disrespect to those guys, they're smashing it, and you know, it's their moment in time. But that's kind of how I think we operate. So I would say that they are the main things that are kind of brought into the organisation.
All right. And at the moment, what would you say are your biggest markets, and how does Defected like approach new markets, or how do you get into like new countries that maybe are not so familiar with your music yet?
Well, I'm going to get into new countries by coming and doing panels like this, and hopefully people then come. No, UK is our biggest market, but we're also we have quite a good profile. I mean, it depends on what you're looking at. If you're looking at an events perspective, with our Ibiza campaign, our Ibiza season, we run 3 parties a week that actually do 5 parties a week, because we do the pre-parties at Mambo on Friday and Sunday. So across the course of the season, that is now about 260,000 tickets in Ibiza across the summer, maybe. So Ibiza's a big one, UK's a big one. Musically, our presence in Australia, and we're developing an events business. The US is a market that, I mean, part of the reason why I was so hungry to do the management buyout was that I feel like there's a big job to be done in North America. I've already spent probably about 5 weeks there this year trying to set up office and kind of figuring out a bit of the psychology of the fan base, because it's very different to Europe. But in all seriousness, like a place like Berlin, where there's such a rich electronic music scene and house music is still in its infancy here, it's really important for us to try to work on that. I mean, I know that generally, and I'm generalising, that people like the music a bit tougher here. It's much more of a techno crowd, or at least that's the perception I have sitting up here.
Techno crowds.
Techno crowds. But of course, you know, you're all here, which is amazing to see. And, you know, talking beforehand about the people who love house music. And Honey Dijon has a really good profile here. Purple Disco Machine has a really good profile here. So that kind of breadth of house, you know, Jack in House and kind of through to disco is clearly evident that there's a market for that. And not just here, in other territories around the world. We are 25 next year, and part of the strategy is that we're going to put on parties in 25 countries next year. We're already at about 21, so it's not a huge amount of difference. But I think that house music is continuing to grow, and I hope that that will result in us being more present here.
So, talking about America and your move over to America, what difference do you see like in the house music coming from America compared to the house music coming from the UK or Europe in general? And what challenges does that bring?
The US market it's I don't know anybody that's, if you've spent time there, and if you have and I'm wrong, come and tell me afterwards. But what I've noticed is that EDM still has left a really big imprint in North America, and what I noticed during COVID times, 2020. Was that stadium DJs like Skrillex and Boys Noise and these sorts of guys started making house music. And I don't know whether they did that because there was a captive audience or whether they did that because people were looking for something a little bit more happy and uplifting, or I don't know whether that's just how the times changed. I always say is a pendulum that swings when it comes down to house music. It goes very tough and kind of techy, and it swings all the way through to like vocal, funky, and always in the middle of that pendulum swaying is house music. It goes backwards and forwards. 1 minute it'll be like minimal techno, then it will be funky house, and always just go through house music. And I felt like that was that transition phase, and I feel like it's happening again now. I feel like some of the kind of more tech house stuff is becoming EDM-esque in North America, certainly in places like California, for one, Vegas, another. But in New York and in Detroit and in Chicago, they're very true to the origins of house music, and there is a solid underground scene. And when you build a house, you've got to build the foundation. Otherwise, you're going to get up this high and it's going to collapse and it's going to be a disaster. You have to build that foundation, and we're not afraid, despite the successes in the UK and in Ibiza, to go into a market and start at 200 cap venues. It's okay. Like, we're not precious about the fact that we can, you know, sell 26,000 tickets in London. We know where we stand in the market. So we're going to just focus our attention on slowly, starting from the ground up. The one thing that I would say is that, you know, you've got to remember the origins of house music comes from North America, right? It comes from suppressed communities, LGBTQ+, Latino, Black, gay communities that weren't allowed in mainstream clubs. And it's really important to remember that as a business, you know. And this is the thing, is we will have a record like a Cola or Pump It Up that will help me to keep 90 people in employment. We control 50,000 masters at Defected, and 602 of those generate 95% of our revenue. That means 49,400 records that we own don't. So it's important to do all of those culturally appropriate, right things and having that balance. We're fortunate that the ecosystem we've generated has enabled us to have commercial value in certain things. And some people will judge us by that because it's all they see. But the people that really understand kind of house music, they'll see the rest of what we do. And, you know, having free fanzines like Faith, et cetera, contributes to that. 24/7 broadcasting, Defected Broadcasting House, with such an array of artists and talent that, you know, sometimes there's only 180 people that are listening to those shows. Other times you get 1 million downloads a week. So it's kind of quite an array of what we do. And we're trying to take that mentality into North America, or at least adapting that approach to North America and not trying to run before we can walk. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, for sure.
That's a bit long-winded.
Oh no, but like regarding that, for example, I would ask, how does Defected Records balance the need to sign commercially successful artists and at the same time like to support the desire to stay like underground and more like niche and like true to the house music? How does that fit together?
The commercial side of it, is it's more luck than judgment. Like I think anybody that tells you otherwise is lying. If you're consistent, when EDM was booming, Simon sat in an A&R meeting and was playing records from people I was going to name, I'm not going to name. But he was playing records that could have easily manoeuvred Defected out of the true house music and into EDM purely for money purposes. Let's be honest. You're going to do something like that, it's for money purposes. And Simon and I always spoke to each other and said, you know what, whenever you think about doing something for money, it's for the wrong reasons. If you do something good, I was talking to a couple of lads before that were probably here somewhere. If you just, I tell my children, if you go and work in McDonald's, you work hard and you'll become a manager and one day you'll actually earn a living out of it. And it's like, for us, we're just like, you know what, let's just be true to house music as much as we possibly can. Everyone makes mistakes, fail fast, fix faster, move on from it, don't worry about it. It's like, we just focused on being true to house music. And actually what happened then, which was before my time, was that led Defected into the deep house space. And that led to MK wanting to come back and him remixing Storm Queen and it be going to #1 in the UK and the rest is history. So you've got to focus on just keep on being true to what... And we're in that phase right now. I have a lot of records that are going to do okay, but they're good records. And the right people are listening to those records. And that's all that matters to me. And I'm in a position where we're fortunate because of the way that the catalogue operates and the business is set up that we can do that. But my advice to young people is to focus on being true to your brand and true to your sound and just keep being consistent and true. If you're just chasing what's going on, it's just not good. It's never going to end well. And that's what we kind of continue to do as a business.
All right. And concerning that, how do you guarantee that things like proceed like more natural? Because, for example, you said with the Cola track, it was like being played everywhere in Ibiza. Was that really because you just directly handed it out to the right people that were really there, or did they like get it from you, or like did they just download it because they liked it and then it was played out, or like is there a balance between that?
It was a bit of both, actually. I mean, to start with, I mean, in that particular instance, that if I'm honest, Cola and Pump It Up, I just felt like there was something more bigger about those records. Pump It Up kind of contradicts what Defected really is about, actually, because Defected should be original vocal house music as much as possible, and Pump It Up is a cover. But when you have DJs like Fisher and Sam Divine and other DJs playing the record, you just knew that there was more to it than that. Like Cola, when you had Solomon and you just knew
it's even crazy for Solomon to play like house music.
Yeah. And you think about that now. I mean, if you sent a record like that to him now, he wouldn't play it. I don't think he'd play it, but he did play it. He was playing it. So it's but you don't know that that's going to happen. You're not like Simon and I never sat there and going, "Oh, this is going to be a hit." You have to work the record. And in this day and age, like right now, working records is so it's almost lost on people a little bit because I think that to some degree, there's such quick virality around social media that a record can go from 0 to 100 miles an hour in half a millisecond, but it's not sustainable. I think people said there's like 20,000 releases a week now. I mean, how do you stand out from that, right? So you have to be present everywhere and working the records. And again, as I said, I'm a club promotions person, working records, plugging records to radio, to streaming services. I want you all to hear this record. If you don't like it, that's fine. But my job is to make sure you hear it. So club DJs need to play the records. The stores need to profile the records. The streaming playlists need to have the records. Radio needs to play it. You need it to be played across multiple territories internationally. You need the DJs talking about it on their social media. You want it to react on TikTok. You want SoundCloud to back it. You need it to be on Apple Music. You need to go round in a circle and make sure the same DJs are playing it or the new DJs are playing it. And you need to make sure, and it just goes on and on and on and on. And you've got to be everything everywhere all at once. And that's, I heard Jengi saying before that they sat on here before me saying that he takes 2 hours to write a social media post. It's like, it's really daunting for young producers trying to break through to actually realise the extent of what they have to do. And I'm very lucky, I'm 43 at the end of June, to have skipped all of that shit because I haven't got the patience for that nowadays, right? But I can only imagine how daunting it is for you. But if you focus your attention on doing all of those things, that's how you're going to be consistent, how you're going to build a community, and how you may stand out from the crowd. Don't look for that viral moment. Here comes the other moderator. Don't chase it. Just, keep doing what you do. Fans bring fans, yeah? So create a fan base for yourself and focus on them. And don't worry about what anybody else is doing, right? Because they don't care about what you're doing. Don't worry about it. Just focus, get your head down, keep doing it right, and keep working your records.
All right. And at the moment, what do you guys do to get new artists to be engaged with you? Or what can new artists do to get engaged with you and have a contact with you, or to stand out, to be the next Low Stepper or John Summit or stuff like that? What can people do to get this attention from you guys?
It's changed. I mean, I get around, I get about 1,200 emails a day, of which probably 3/4 of those are demos. It's just impossible to listen to. I think as a business, we now get between 2,000 and 2,500 demos a day sent to the inbox. And I have a team of 10 A&Rs, it's just not possible to listen to them. So there are a couple of things that we do. We have loads of labels, right? That's a lot. 26 labels is a lot, even by our own standards. It'd be even more than that this year. But each one has its own definition, sound, and I think there are certain producers that are assigned to certain labels, and there will be certain sounds that we adhere to. Defected, as a mothership, has that duty of care to release, a certain caliber of house music, and we've released some records for some up-and-coming artists this year. That Prunk and Archie Hamilton, and there's a few others that come in. The Endor track, when he did Pump It Up, he was virtually unknown. So there are times when records will get heard and signed by a label like Defected. The most chance of that happening is when one of our DJs played a record, and I'm like, what's this? And that is what I tell people, is try to develop relationships with the DJs that are playing at the events, because cold calling an email is amongst 3,000 emails a day to say, hi, here's my life story, there's a link here, my record, is a much lesser chance of getting heard than me standing behind Sam Divine saying, what is this record? And actually, lots of records that we've signed have come from our DJs playing records. Sam Divine in particular is really good at supporting young talent. She's going to kill me for saying that, because you're all going to send her demos. But
you're going to follow her around.
But Low Stepper too, and I think that that's probably what I would say is your best chance of getting a record heard. Also to get some good feedback on it, because there's some really good champions out there. But we also do have development areas within the business. So we are a lot more open to releasing from unknown artists on DFTD or D for Dance. And there are other labels that are more heritage in sounding, and some, even down to Sandy Rivera always working with others, and Yoruba working with others. And there's always those chances. If you are going to send a demo, if you are going to send me a demo, then I would ask to a couple of things. Please don't send it to me on social media, because it's quite difficult to manage the comms on those. If you are going to send it to me, I would, generally do it by email, and I'm happy for you to send them to me by email. I'll generally 80% of the time, probably, come back to people with some kind of feedback, because once every 2 weeks, I will spend like a whole Sunday listening through tracks, needle dropping and seeing if there's anything that I've kind of missed. But I would put in there, make sure that it's named properly. Artist name, track title, put your email address in the track name, please. Because the amount of times I'm on a plane and I'm like, this is good, who sent me this? And it's like, untitled. I'm like, brilliant, I don't know who sent it to me. So it's like, just make sure that the data and the metadata is correct. But don't be disheartened by no's, right? Because every no is closer to a yes. And also, don't think you can run before you can walk, because you do have to pay your dues. We all have to pay our dues. Like we've all done it. It's very rare that somebody releases one record and becomes a superstar. So have a plan, have a label strategy. Go, you know what? I'm going to target these labels. These are going to be my entry points into the music industry. And then I'm going to build from that, and I'm going to go to the next level. And when I've got to the next level, I'm going to go to the next level. And once I've got all of this ammunition, and hopefully the DJs have been playing your records and there's a little bit of recognition, then I'm going to aim for there. Going from 0 to 100 miles an hour is not a good thing. Not for anyone. Not when you're driving, not when you're walking, not when you're doing anything. So, you know, be realistic about it. And also understanding the other side is it, you know, in the summertime, we are relentlessly busy and we try very, very hard to kind of get back to everyone, and it's not always possible. Be a little bit patient on that too, because it can be very off-putting when I'm getting chased 3 or 4 times if I listen to something. So I would say take all of that into account when you're sending demos. Strategy, like think about your strategy. The most important thing you can possibly do is make good music. That's the most important thing that you can do. If you send me a demo and I say no, don't immediately send me another demo, because I tell you what, I'm going to think, why the hell have you not sent me that second track in the first place? It must not be as good as the first one you sent me. So you have to think about these things strategically, and you know it's not easy. It's not easy, but I think with a plan, and you'll get to where you want to be. I hope.
Well,
manifest. I believe you will get to where you want to be.
And regarding, like, you just said, like, don't said like 1 or 2 like tracks. You said you're mostly working with singles right now, I guess. So would you rather like just release 1 track? There's no more like EPs coming out at Defect at the moment. No,
I'm actually, one of the things we focused on single strategy away from compilations back in 2016, and but now I'm like looking to focus on artist projects. And if you look at what we did with Honey, Dijon and Black Girl Magic, we worked. It's probably the best example of how we'd work a campaign over a period of time. We worked that for about 3 years, and we started releasing singles in 2020. I think we ended up releasing 6 singles from the album, and then the album. When the album came out in November, originally that was going to be the kind of end of the line for Black Girl Magic, but there's still a job to be done, and especially with Honey and Luke and Chris and co picking up multiple Grammys last year for their work with Beyonce. We think that there's still a job to be done with Black Girl Magic, and Honey is now working, whilst we're working this album, Honey is working on writing the next album. So we've signed a couple of interesting projects. We've signed a project called Yours, which is Maverick Sabre and New Machine and Jake and Sonny Hall. Maverick Sabre typically isn't a dance act, but he's a phenomenal writer and producer. New Machine has written for Ed Sheeran and Georgia Smith, but he's also a phenomenal producer. And Jake and Sonny Hall are marketeers, actually, and fashionistas. And the 4 of them have come together to create a project that's housey, but it's quite, you can listen to it outside of the club environment. And we're just about to start working that project. We have Ben Westbeach, who has been a frequent part of the Defected community over the last 12 years, releasing with us when we controlled Soul Heaven and Strictly Rhythm, and working with us for The Vision. And now he's releasing a solo album, and we'll work a number of singles with him. We're working with a singer called See Me Not, who we've released a single for previously called Borderline, which Jamie Jones remixed. She's going to be coming with a mixtape, then a number of singles, and then an LP. We are remixing the Todd Edwards catalogue, which we own. We have, what else have we got coming up that's like artist-led projects? Sam Divine has got a number of singles coming. Ferric Dawn's got a number of singles coming. So we are working artist projects. And I don't like to use the term album anymore, but album generally is going to be the thing that kind of draws a line in the campaign. We'll work singles over a 2 or 3 year period, and then the album, the body of work will come out as a kind of just, the final leg of the campaign. In amongst that helps us to have long-term relationships with people that have those bodies of work. But in amongst that, what we are known for are club singles, and we'll continue to be true to the history and heritage of the label.
Okay, perfect. So before we go to the questions from the audience, I just wanted to ask, what can we as like German house fans do to have more Defected in Germany? Because like you mentioned, like I think we do have quite a lot of like German artists. Like Purple Disco Machine is the best example. I've known him like since ages, since he was like pretty much a local, I would say, like hang out on backstage and stuff. And now he's like world famous, I would say, like with hits. And did he not also get a Grammy as well?
He did, yeah.
Yeah, exactly, like stuff like that with house music, which is like crazy to think about that a German artist goes so big with a UK label. What can we actually as Germans maybe do to like get you guys more over here?
Well, that's a question. I think that's something that we need to think about, because clearly there is interest, and as I said, starting off small and kind of growing, I think that's probably something that we might need to consider. Let me turn that question around on you. Who should I be talking to? Which clubs? Which clubs are the ones I need to be knocking on the door?
I was already on. I was already on you guys, like trying to get a showcase over here. So
right, well, there you go. Then you heard it first, right? If it doesn't happen now, it's his fault. So,
so maybe to the audience, is there a spare mic so we can have like some questions to the audience? Yes. Yeah, perfect.
So. From a producer's perspective, you told the story about Camel Fat and Monster and Cola. How do I develop the ear as a producer for someone like you to like the song that I submit?
I think if we knew the answer to that question, then we would probably all be multi-millionaires. But what I would say is that it goes back to what the consistent message that you'll hear from me is about just being true to your sound and who you are. And if that's not me and that's another label, then that's cool, right? So I would say, as a fan of the music, if people are doing it for the right reasons and they're here for the love of the music and not they're in love with the music and not in love with the scene, there's a difference, right? Because you've got the people that are here just to party and go out and party, and that's cool. But you also have the people that actually are creative, who have a desire to express their creativity. I just say being true to what it is that you're trying to make. And if that ends up like, Ninja Tune or Toolroom or Defected or Drum Code or Hospitality or any of these different sort of labels, because each one has its own sound, then that's fine. I get sent drum and bass demos all the time, and I'm like, do you actually know what Defected is, right? And it's like, just be true to yourself, and then you'll find your home.
Thank you. I have another question. Do you feel that the increased popularity of house music leads to a decrease in quality of productions made by producers?
Yeah, absolutely. It's there's two things. One, time. And time is becoming, people's time is a commodity, and it's getting more and more challenging for people to make time in their lives. And as such, that affects the producer's ability to focus on making quality records. You used to have to book a studio and hire in session musicians and write sessions and you could take months writing a record. Now you can sit on a plane with your headphones and your laptop, and you can knock out a beat in a flight. It's a blessing and a curse. It means that there are more people with accessibility to be able to write and express their creativity, but also it means that there's a lot of half-finished, half-assed records that get sent around.
Some more questions?
Hi, thank you. The question would be focused on if social media of the artists is important for you to choose or to actually work with them. Is that something that you really give value to?
And what I'm about to say is absolute truth, whether people believe me or not. I'm not looking at numbers on social media. I want to know who you are, because if if you don't fit the Defected ethos, and if you're a certain kind of person that I don't really want to be part of what we're doing, and you're posting on social media stuff that's kind of aggressive or goes against our morals and ethics, that's what I'm looking at social media for. social media will tell me, give me a good indication of who you are as a person, and that's what we use it for. I'm not looking for how much social media you've got. If the music's good, it doesn't matter how many people you've got following you on social media.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks for being here. I'm going to come talk to you about California after. But I had a question about when you were doing the management buyout of the label. Was there any pushback or trepidation from the community and fan base? And if so, how did you do that? Because I think you've done a great job with the transition, but didn't know if there was any concern when Simon was leaving and things like this.
There's always going to be, you have no love without hate, right? So there have been people that have, not been happy with the transition, but it's been like minimalistic, really. It's been very few and far between. I did a radio show early in the year to talk about up-and-coming records. It's the first time I'd done that, and that was probably the first time that I've probably received maybe 15 or so negative comments. Who's this guy? Simon forever, blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay, well, whatever. But no press is bad press. If people are talking about it, great. Like, I'm happy. I don't really don't get offended by negativity. It's your opinion. It's okay. I think for anybody that knows me and knows, how closely Simon and I have worked and how what my intentions are, then they won't feel that way. And if they do, that's fine. That's your opinion. You don't have to. I'm not begging for people to like us. But I have a good relationship with our community, and having worked alongside Simon for so long and been there alongside him in Croatia and these venues and meeting people and actually having direct relationships with superfans who text me their opinion on stuff, it's I feel like, as I say, I'd rather do actions speak louder than words. So what I'm doing, I'm like to hope, is an extension of what I'm telling you guys today, and that's carrying the business forward and carrying on the work that we've done for 25 years, and that is where if people are negative about that, then hopefully time will be a healer. I miss Simon being around, right? As in, selfishly, I get on with him. I would love him to be part of this business forever. He will be part of this business forever, because ultimately, Defected is Simon Dunmore. It's his brainchild that's created this. And now my job is to kind of carry on being true to what we both believe in. And I'm sure people will see that, even if they didn't initially.
Wow. I would also agree that we all think that you do a great job, to be honest.
Thank you.
Another question over there?
Really house music lover. I really believe that Germany need more house music, especially Berlin. And we were lucky enough to have some glitterbox showcased in Hamburg, especially because mostly come from there. It's quite big. And getting to glitterbox, I want to ask you, what was the reason to create such a, by the way, one of the best things that happened to the disco music lovers like me in the scene? What was the reason to go for glitterbox, and what was the reason to create that concept?
In the beginning of 2014, Ibiza was about to sort of take shape, and it was very, very EDM and techno, and Simon was in Ibiza, and some of his friends were texting saying, I'm in Ibiza this weekend, where can I go? And there wasn't anywhere for them to go. And we were doing Defected at Boom at the time, and Boom had also, the owners of Boom had contacted Simon to say, have you got any ideas about a second night that we need that's a little bit more contemporary? And Simon came back to the office in April 2014 and said to us, we're going to start a new night in Ibiza that is focused on contemporary house and disco, where the target demographics are all-inclusive, all-encompassing, everything that's opposite what's going on in the EDM and the techno world today. And we were like, great, this is amazing. When do you want to kick it off? And he's like, in May. And we were like, oh. And it took about 8 weeks for us to get everything together, and we put on the first night. The idea was for it to be, if you think about, initially it was about people that weren't into the trends, that were into contemporary house and disco. It was, Studio 54. It was a bit more kind of just classy, is maybe a right word to say at the origins. But when we did glitterbox in IB for that season, the first week, it was like 200 people in the club, of which we gave most of the tickets out for free. And then there was, by the end of the season, we had like 800-900 in, boom. And it wasn't the glowing success, it was just perseverance of us knowing that was something different, that nothing else was like that at the time. And now you have quite a lot of competitive brands that are doing a similar thing, which is great. But we just focused our attention on just keep doing the same thing. And then we moved to space. We started the season at like 1,200 and finished at 2,000. Then we moved to high. And then high started off at about 2,500, and by the end of the season it was about 3.5. And now we're doing 6,000 tickets a week in IB for high. Glitterbox has become quite something, and it stands for so much more. It's about, as I said, it really is designed to be true to the origins of house music and be all-encompassing. And whether you're a straight couple or a gay couple or anything, it doesn't matter. It's all about music. It's about contemporary house and disco. It's about acceptance. It's about equality. It's about inclusivity, and it's about just having a good time. The real reasons why you're supposed to be there in the first place. And yeah, it's Glitterbox is very special. I think those that have been there probably agree. And yeah, if you get a chance to check it out, if you haven't already, I suggest you do.
So one more last question, and then I would say we finish.
Hi, Wes. It's good to have you here. So I have actually a couple of questions. So first question is, obviously you made quite few big decisions in your life. I can imagine it could get a bit scary for you, or maybe not, but I don't know. But is there any particular technique you're using to overcome those moments, or to, sort of, is there any technique that helps you to make those decisions? Is there maybe any book you've read or anything that help you?
In the build-up to some of the decisions I've made, one thing, I'm an eldest child, and one thing is I've always been empowered with the confidence to make the right decisions. And my parents always kind of gave me that responsibility. You've got to look after your siblings. I was captain of the football team. All those kind of responsible roles of my life. So I don't really make decisions unless I really believe them. And then, as such, I'm kind of like manifest a little bit. Well, I actually manifest a lot. I have to be true to myself about this. I do manifest a lot. And I'll focus on, if I make a decision, I kind of know what it is I'm trying to achieve. And as such, I think that really helps you just to focus on what you're doing and what you're trying to do. And even if I get knocked back or you fall over, you just get up again and you just carry on moving. I'm still on that pursuit of what it is that I've kind of aiming for. I didn't really read or learn any of those things. I studied psychology and sociology when I was younger. And that helped me to understand people, because I actually like people and like the natural social integration and psychology behind decision making. But it wasn't until I started at Defected that I started reading books by Simon Sinek. And Simon Sinek talks about people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And I think that the underlying kind of methodology for everything that I've ever achieved is I do wear my heart on my sleeve. I'm sure some of the things I've said today probably show that. But I am very much talking about why I do what I do, right? I'm not looking to make loads of money. I'm not looking to be competitive. I just want to know you to know why I do what I do. And I do that for love of house music, right? There's two things that I love outside of my family and friends, more than anything in the world, and that's house music and West Ham. And if you follow me on social media, the chances are I'm probably talking about one of those things.
I was actually about to ask if you're coming to Prague for European final.
I am coming to Prague.
Wicked. Thank you.
Well, I'll say we keep it by that. Give a big applause for Wez Saunders, and thank you for being here.
Thank you.
I hope we see you more often over here in Germany now that you've got your foot in Berlin. And yeah.
Thank you very much. Cheers.